Hello, I'm Claire Poole and welcome to the Climate of Sport podcast, the show in which you get the inside track on all things sport and sustainability globally. Join me every week where I'll be chatting to a special guest about news, opinion and insights on how sport is moving to a more environmentally friendly future or taking action on climate change. Hi everyone and welcome to the Climate of Sport podcast with me, Claire Poole. I'm joined by Sustainability Senior Manager at the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022, José Retana. José, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Claire. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm very well. It's delighted to be chatting to you about the upcoming World Cup, and we've got loads to talk about in terms of the efforts and the sustainability work, and a lot of things to get through in terms of the content, which is wonderful. So I think, as we always do with the pod, I want to start and hear a little bit about you, in terms of yourself. José, background on you and sort of how you came to this role, and then also what your role at Qatar 22 includes.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm not one of those amazing sports figures or a famous athlete that became a sustainability champion, similar to the ones that you had in previous podcasts. Actually, I come more from the sustainability space into sport later on, and I would say that my career, my expertise has been shaped by various different stages in my life. I'm originally from Costa Rica, and Costa Rica is known for being quite a sustainably minded country. So I mean that shaped a little bit, who I am, not only in terms of way of thinking, but also my studies in development economics, my work also with various NGOs. I was, you wouldn't believe this, but I was an environmental activist as well when I was a student. Yeah. Eventually, I joined a major consulting company, actually in the UK, where I worked for more than 15 years, looking at how companies have an impact on the environments, the societies, the economies in which they operate. So basically helping companies understand those impacts, measure and monetize those impacts, and actually how that information then related back to the way that they take decisions at a senior level. So I continued doing that for quite a long period of time, working across many different sectors and industries. Eventually, that led me to take that work to the Middle East, particularly Qatar, but also other countries in the region, and starting to support companies and also governments in the Middle East to develop their sustainability strategies, to understand their impacts and take action on those particular impacts, which helped me to understand quite a lot the national visions in the region, the Qatar national vision, the national development strategy. So mixing sustainability expertise with some local expertise, then that led me into the opportunity to work for the FIFA World Cup as sustainability senior manager. Actually, I joined this role in 2017. So it's quite a weird, indirect way of actually getting to Qatar and getting to the World Cup from far away. I think one of the questions that I usually get is, how did you actually end up in Qatar doing this particular role? But in terms of my role as sustainability senior manager, I think in a nutshell, my role has been to coordinate the development of a sustainability strategy for the World Cup, and of course the implementation of it. I mean that sounds maybe simplistic and not very complex, but actually I would say that includes a huge amount of coordination. We work very closely with our counterparts in FIFA, obviously the tournament owners, as well as the Qatar host country organization that is the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy. And I am part of a joint venture between FIFA and Qatar that is called the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022 LLC, or Q22. And we are actually in charge directly of the tournament operation. So we coordinate, we collaborate heavily with our counterparts in FIFA, the Supreme Committee, other national institutions as well. But as you know, Claire, I mean, sustainability is not simple. It's not just about a sustainability team or teams actually doing their work. It's about collaborating across many different functional areas. Is how we do transport sustainably, how we do procurement sustainably, how we do venue management, accommodation, security, everything in a sustainable way, and basically how we work with them to eliminate, reduce environmental impacts, respect and protect human rights, and leave a legacy for the country. So that is, in a nutshell, what I do. That's my role.
And in terms of that, the role then and how that, so you've been there 5 years by the time the tournament takes place. You started in 2017. So give us a top line in terms of, from your perspective, the real key FIFA World Cup 22 sustainability efforts in terms of where, a lot of time's been spent and what are the big marquee elements to the sustainability strategy.
Yeah, of course. I mean, one thing to note, obviously, Qatar was given the rights to host the World Cup back in 2010. So already 12 years ago, a long time ago. So the sustainability efforts start all the way since the bid times. Already since the bid times, Qatar committed to host a carbon neutral World Cup. They, of course, committed as well to ensure the construction of the stadiums will have a legacy for the country. They also committed to other environmental projects. At the same time, since 2010 until I was joining in 2015, 2017, many other initiatives have taken place. I mean, Qatar had already been developing a number of legacy programs. For example, the Workers' Welfare Team had been put in place by the Supreme Committee that was already working on protecting the rights and welfare of workers across construction sites. You had legacy programs such as Generation Amazing, that is all about promoting youth development through football activities. The Yusur Institute, for example, that was developing capacities in the country in relation to event management. So quite a lot of different initiatives had been put in place. So by the time that I arrived in 2017, it was very much about starting not with a clean sheet of paper, but actually doing a new materiality assessment and basically asking again the question, what are the most important sustainability topics that need to be addressed by the World Cup in Qatar? We actually carried out quite a lot of consultation. We consulted more than 160 stakeholders through surveys, through interviews, in order to build our sustainability strategy. I mean, you can find actually all the process that we developed is published. Actually, we published a document on this. We, of course, learned a lot from previous World Cups, but also previous mega sport events. I mean, we looked at other events and tried to learn from their strategies, from the documents actually that they had published. So we took, of course, what Qatar was already doing, the learnings from previous mega sport events, plus, I guess, what I was bringing to the mix was that sort of cross-industry expertise on sustainability. So it was a good mix in terms of bringing all of those things together. The result was the development, or as you say, Claire, the sustainability strategy that consists of 5 pillars, 20 material issues, and more than 80 different projects or initiatives actually that are helping us to deliver on our sustainability efforts. Obviously, we're not going to cover every single thing today, but if I can give you a high-level overview of the 5 pillars that we have. So starting with the environmental pillar, I mean, the environmental pillar is all about eliminating or at least minimizing the environmental impacts that we have, and wherever possible, of course, providing solutions that add environmental value in association to the World Cup. Here is where we look at how our stadiums are getting certified, sustainability certified in terms of construction, management, in terms of design, in terms of operations. We look also at the way that we manage our carbon emissions. We're going to, I think, probably go in more detail into that area later on. Also, we look at water use, air quality. We look at the waste management program that we have as well. So all of that is covered by our environmental pillar. The human pillar of our strategy looks at the way that we safeguard workers' rights and also work on the development of workforce around the World Cup. And here's where we look at ensuring that there are decent working and living conditions and fair recruitment practices in relation to the workers engaged in the construction and also provision of services around the FIFA World Cup sites. most importantly, the implementation of the worker welfare standards, and also providing remedy in relation to issues associated with workers' rights. Our social pillar actually looks at how we are providing an inclusive tournament experience that is, for everyone that is involved in the World Cup, regardless of nationality, regardless of skin color, disability, sexual orientation, or any other reason, really. Here we focus on how the infrastructure is accessible for disabled people, the services that are being provided as well, how we promote cultural understanding, non-discrimination, inclusivity, how we respect the rights of media, for example, how we provide a safe, welcoming environment for everyone, including supporting the training of security forces as well to help respect and protect human rights. The economic pillar is all about local business development. How we, as a result of the World Cup, we provide the local capacity, the growth of business, economic benefits for the country, but also very importantly, thinking in a sustainable way, how we ensure that a relatively small country is able to host quite a big tournament, really, without increasing the capacity of the services so much that then they become basically obsolete or irrelevant after the tournament. So basically, that is a risk that we manage through this particular pillar. Also, we cover in this pillar how, what are the plans to use the infrastructure that is being developed for the tournament after. And here is where quite a lot of plans, quite a lot of consultation has been done with communities and businesses in terms of the future use of stadiums and other sites that have been developed in association with the tournament. And finally, the pillar of governance. And this is all about us developing robust management systems for the World Cup. I have to say, something that we are very proud about is that this is the first World Cup to achieve the ISO 20001 certification on sustainability management systems. And also, this is the first World Cup to develop a sustainable sourcing code and to ensure the implementation of that code across all the procurements that are happening, not only through Q22, through the Supreme Committee, as well as FIFA in relation to the tournament. You may have also seen from the beginning of this year, we have published an online sustainability report. So all of those 80 different projects and all of these pillars and issues that I am talking about, they are actually being reported on in our online report that is in FIFA.com. So please take a look at it. I mean, all of our work in terms of developing the strategy itself, how we're progressing in relation to its implementation, all of this is published. And that is part, of course, of our governance pillar. Hopefully, that gives you a little bit of a very high level overview of the work that we're doing.
Due to the nature of our podcast and our listeners, we're probably going to focus a lot on the environmental pillar. But I think it's great to get an overview of the other areas as well, that this obviously sustainability goes beyond the environmental side, although it's an area of interest for us. So just to come back a little bit then, I think there's been a lot of coverage about this recently anyway, in terms of the words that, especially mega sports events, the likes of the World Cup, the Olympic Games, Commonwealth Games, etc., use around how they position the tournament itself. Climate neutral, carbon neutral, climate positive. There's a lot of these words going around. And I know you mentioned there that FIFA World Cup 22 is going to be carbon neutral. And although we know the definition of what carbon neutral is, can you explain what that means for the tournament in terms of how you've gone about this in terms of trying to achieve carbon neutrality?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yes, we are working towards a fully carbon neutral FIFA World Cup. We will not claim that during the tournament. Actually, I mean, we will always say that we're working towards that because one of the most important things in relation to carbon neutrality is, of course, understanding what are the carbon emissions associated. And when I say carbon, I'm not talking only of carbon, of course, as a greenhouse gas. I'm talking of all greenhouse gases associated with the tournament and the CO2 equivalent in relation to that. So in our case, what this means is using the GHG protocol implemented by a third-party independent expert to help us estimate all of the emissions associated with the tournament. And when I say all of the emissions associated with the tournament, I'm talking about the emissions associated with the preparation of the tournament. We actually start measuring since 2011 in terms of the preparation, all the way to the staging of the tournament itself, that of course, it starts at least 1 month in terms of the exclusive use period of sites, as well as the post-tournament activities that relate to dismantling of venues. Also, in terms of preparation, we don't only have construction activities in relation to preparation, we also have preparatory tournaments. I mean, as you may know, we held the 2 Club World Cups in 2019, also in 2020 was actually held in 2021 because of COVID. Also, we held the FIFA Arab Cup. We held the Congress, the FIFA Congress earlier this year. We also held the draw. So there are a number of different preparatory events that take place. All of those are included. At the moment, the Arab Cup was not included in the ex-ante study that we actually published, but it will be added in the ex-post that we will do. So that is something quite important that I want to highlight, Claire, as well, because the measurement element of this is fundamental, and it is important that we do an ex-ante study with assumptions, with estimations, so that we get a feel, we get an idea of where the emissions are coming from. What are the main sources of emissions? Which ones can we target? But also that we, after the tournament, only after the tournament, we will know many things. We will know, of course, it's until now that we know all the teams that have qualified for the World Cup. We didn't know certain things. We did the ex-ante, like we didn't know back then that we were going to be hosting the FIFA Arab Cup, for example. And there are certain, assumptions and sources of data that have actually changed since then. So it is important to remember that we're doing that ex-ante measurement, and we're also doing the ex-post measurement. The second thing that it means for us is, of course, working on reductions. We, of course, are able to work on reductions in areas that we control more directly. And, we have been implementing a number of different measures in relation to reduction. I mean, for example, measures in terms of the efficiency of the stadiums, the energy efficiency of the stadiums, in terms of lighting, in terms of the way that they are cooled. For example, I'm happy to go into more detail in relation to that later on. Also, the public transportation system. I mean, quite a lot of work has been done over the last few years in terms of providing public transport solutions for the tournament participants. We have a new metro system that connects to most of the stadiums. We have, of course, buses as well. 25% of those public buses are actually electric. We have also been working with our partners Hyundai and Kia actually to maximize the number of event transport vehicles that will be electric. So a significant number of those vehicles will be actually either hybrid or electric, which is actually transforming and increasing significantly the number of those vehicles in the country. We're looking at replacing generators, for example, with substations. So as opposed to have, I mean, as you know, a mega sport event has the need for a lot of generators, given that not all, the grid doesn't reach all of the different areas, around the stadium that need to be powered. And predominantly areas like broadcasting need very, very efficient sources of energy that are all the time very, very reliable. So we have been able to actually replace many of those generators are going to be replaced by substations that are going to be connected directly to the grid. That creates, of course, a lot more low emission energy sources, as well as Qatar is now about to launch an 800 megawatt solar plant. Actually, that solar plant is going to provide about 10% of the energy needs in the country. Actually, 1 month of operation of that solar plant is able to power all of the stadiums for an entire year, actually. So, linking that and being able to provide that source of energy into the grid is actually making a big difference. So those are, I guess, some of the examples in terms of how we're working to reduce emissions. We're also working with sectors associated to the World Cup. So, accommodation, for example, is one of the big areas of emissions. I mean, if you look at our GHG footprinting report, is about 24%, actually 20%, if I'm not wrong, of the emissions are coming from the accommodation sector. I mean, it's not a sector that we control directly, but it's a sector that we have been working with in terms of promoting that they improve their environmental practices, including reducing their GHG emissions as well. So, we have been able to promote that. But if I'm also, quite honest, as you can see in our footprinting report, there are many areas that are outside of our control. Most of the emissions are related to Scope 3. More than half of the emissions are related to international travel of spectators and others coming to the country. So the offsetting of remaining emissions will be, of course, significant. That is, of course, another part of what we call being a carbon neutral event. So, those are some of the main pillars in terms of what it means for us to be carbon neutral.
Just coming to the offsetting, we couldn't have this conversation, Jose, without talking about the recent Carbon Market Watch report, obviously, which alleged that on your accounting on carbon isn't transparent, it isn't wide-reaching enough, you're not far along enough with your offset projects, etc., compared to where you should be. And kind of the macro takeaway there that it's tricky to host an event of this size and claim there's no impact on the environment. How do you respond to those findings that they've taken away from what your work has contributed to?
Yeah, sure. So absolutely. I mean, we are aware of the report. We have also issued some formal responses to the report as well. I mean, those comments from our side, responses from our side, have been picked up as well by different media outlets together with the report that has been published. I think, look, in general, we welcome, of course, the report. I mean, we always welcome a different perspective. I mean, at the end of the day, we all are aiming to achieve the same, which is basically to advance the methodologies to better tackle climate change at the end of the day. So, welcome, those different perspectives. Also, I think I appreciated the way that the report does acknowledge the best practices that we're implementing. The way that, of course, we have based our measurements on the GHG protocol, the way that, of course, we have done an ex-ante report that I was talking about before. Of course, one of the things that the report itself was not very clear about is that we're actually going to be doing an ex-post report as well after the tournament, which actually increases credibility, increases transparency in this whole thing. I would say the main criticism, if I could just, focus on that particular point, is that the authors of the report basically do not agree in the way that we are spreading the emissions associated with the stadium construction over the lifetimes of the facility. So they believe that we shouldn't do that we should actually attribute everything just to the tournament. In essence, they put in doubt the stadium legacy plans in particular, which is not the approach that we have taken. Obviously, we do believe in the legacy plans that are being taken. We do believe that many of those plans will be put in action. I mean, stadiums have been designed, have been built from the very start, not just for the FIFA World Cup. I mean, obviously, they have followed FIFA requirements, but they have followed community consultations about the uses of the stadiums after the tournament. They have been designed also to remove the upper tiers of many of the stadiums in order to make way for new uses. There is a whole demountable stadium that as well will be completely removed after the tournament. And one of the stadiums is going to have a completely non-sport related use. So those temporary constructions are fully attributable to the tournament, like the upper tiers or the demountable stadium as well, and those have been included. But of course, we do believe that there are going to be future uses related to offices, related to boutique hotels, related to university facilities. Of course, the pressings themselves do have a lot of uses as well. So that's why we believe that the approach that has been taken is robust, and we fully trust basically the way that basically the GHG protocol has been implemented by our advisors, South Pole and ASTAT. What I would not say, though, Claire, I'm not going to present here a picture that implementing the legacy plans is a done deal. For sure not. We have seen in previous mega sporting events always situations, cases everywhere where some of them work, some of them don't work. And I know it's going to be, of course, tough. It's going to require a huge amount of effort from Qatar. But Qatar, interestingly, is putting a lot of the organizational structures in place. I mean, having the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy, an organization that actually will continue to oversee that legacy going forward, is actually a very, very important a step forward in terms of implementing those. So actually that, it is definitely a common practice to break the emissions across basically the life cycle of the stadium, the construction and use emissions in relation to the stadiums. One thing that I really do not appreciate and that I will not accept is the point about the lack of transparency. I think we have been very transparent. We have published our strategy, we have published our progress, we have published the way that we develop our plans, we published all of our methodology. If there was some data that was not included or that was omitted from a particular report, it was not done at all in a deliberate way. In fact, we have been also not only publishing a lot of information, but also we have been responding to a lot of questions from different media outlets that have been asking additional questions, and we have been collaborating with them as much as we can, clarifying any questions that they have for us in relation to the way that we have been measuring our emissions. I think the last point that I would make about this is that one thing that we may want to consider, and for the listeners, I think of the podcast, I mean, the people that are participating in a Sports Positive Summit and others, is that perhaps it is something that the key actors in mega sports events need to look at. I think in more detail. I mean, is there a need to come together to agree on some specific sector guidance as well as other sectors are actually doing in terms of the implementation of international standards in areas such as construction of new sporting sites, for example. I mean, I would welcome that. I would promote that as well. And what we are doing ourselves is trying to do our very best, trying to share and be transparent on the way that we are doing things and the assumptions that we have taken, and basically contributing to the conversation. That's where I would put our effort. And
I think you've led us on to another point, Jose, in terms of, you've mentioned there the kind of some of the stadiums, et cetera, the construction. And you mentioned earlier when we were talking, the size of Qatar as a nation and the number of stadiums there and the reuse, et cetera, of some of those and one demountable stadium, et cetera. Just in terms of the life cycles of some of those stadiums, you mentioned tiers being taken off and being used in different ways for some of the stadiums, and then one that's going to be completely deconstructed and possibly shipped somewhere else to be used. I don't know if there's further information available on where that's going or if that's confirmed yet, and how far away is it going to be, and is there going to be a lot of carbon emissions in terms of transporting that somewhere else? So it'd be great just to hear a bit more from you about current plans around some of that.
These plans are still work in progress. They are being led particularly by Qatar as a host country, and I know a number of proposals are being assessed. There is a need to assess a number of different things. I mean, number one, each of the stadiums has a particular legacy plan and has a number of different stakeholders associated to that particular stadium. So the removal of the upper tiers are of course, creating space for new uses. Mm-hmm. So it is about those stakeholders identifying what are those uses, of course, based on the community consultation that has happened before. At the moment, of course, there are different international discussions as well happening in relation to where those structures that have been taken out or that will be taken out, will be going to. Still nothing to be communicated externally. As well, in terms of the demountable stadium, I know that there are very, very interesting plans. You will know, Claire, that we have done also a study in relation to the demountable stadium that we published as well. We looked at what are the type of future plans and future uses associated with Stadium 974, that is a demountable stadium that will actually make sense from a carbon emission perspective. Obviously, the closer it goes and the more times that it's used, the better, of course. And the initial emissions associated to that stadium were higher than other stadiums because of the steel components associated with it. But of course, the more that it is used in other places, I mean, the use-related emissions are also lower. So, I mean, it's an interesting model that is actually being taken into account, but more will be communicated in the future. I mean, remember that not all the stadiums in Qatar were new. I mean, one was already existing; it was just refurbished. Another one, Stadium Ahmad bin Ali, 90% of the materials of the previous stadium that was there. So basically, it replaced a stadium that was already there, but 90% of the materials from that particular stadium were reused. The demountable stadium is not only about the way that it's going to be used in the future; it's also about leaving, pristine, high-value land available for future developments, for future uses in Qatar as well. So it's a mix. It's not only about the use of those structures elsewhere, it's about the way that these, of course, structures are going to continue to be used in Qatar. And, at the moment, there are many plans in relation to the sites. As I was saying before, we have clinics, we have hotels, we have offices, community services, even wedding halls as well. I mean, people wanted to have spaces where they could get married, areas where new businesses could be incubated. I mean, of course, hubs for football teams, local as well as national women's and men's football team. And also, I mean, the case of Lusail Stadium, it will be completely converted into a non-sport use. So it will not be a stadium anymore. Okay. At the moment, various ideas are being assessed in relation to it, but I can assure you that it will become a very interesting non-sport use attraction that will be, of course, attracting visitors to Qatar and, of course, new sources of income. I mean, the precinct, you have many different things. I mean, already many of these uses are already in place. It's not that we have to wait until after the tournament actually to happen. Already, for example, in Al Bayt Stadium, the fact that the skyboxes can be converted into hotel rooms is already happening. Has already been used by teams that come to Qatar to train during the winter in their countries, for example. So that is already taking place. I take my kids all the time to the parks. There are running tracks, there are cycle tracks, there are facilities for other sports, I mean, let's not forget one more thing as well. And Qatar is also working more and more on becoming a sports hub. It's not just the World Cup. I mean, as I said, there are many already other events that happened in the past that have been using those stadiums already. But also, they will be used for the 2030 Asian Games. I mean, as you know, Doha will be the host of those games, as well as other events that Qatar is actually also applying for. So there will be other uses for those stadiums as well going forward.
And we look forward to hearing more about that as well as those plans solidify. So what about as well, we'll do a quick fire through some other environmental impacts of taking place in Qatar, in terms of obviously a very hot, very arid region, and football known, of course, the heart of football, the football pitches. Again, we've already seen coverage of the energy and water needs to create that environment in a landscape like Qatar, as well as obviously the heat and the need for air conditioning, etc., and the environmental implications of those. So talk to us about the energy and water needs to put on an event like a World Cup in a region like Qatar.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that of course Qatar has very little fresh water. The water in Qatar is mainly coming from the sea, is desalinated water. So there are particular plants that actually generate both water and energy at the same time, and that basically powered by natural gas in the country. However, in terms of energy and water, I mean, the stadiums have been designed to be highly energy efficient. So basically, if you compare an average energy use of the FIFA World Cup stadiums against international energy standards for buildings, the World Cup stadiums use 30% less energy, or are 30% more energy efficiency, more energy efficient. And basically that is based on both active energy efficient features as well as passive. So everything from efficient cooling, ventilation, LED lighting, as well as insulation, the smart orientation as well of the stadium itself, and also a lot of landscaping around the stadium that actually creates a cooling effect. If you look at water, if you compare, again, an average World Cup stadium against benchmarks of the international plumbing codes, the World Cup stadiums are using 40% less water actually, in comparison to other buildings. So, how is that achieved? Well, you have things like water vapor is collected from the cooling systems so that it is used for irrigation. Recycled water as well is used for irrigation. So we're not talking of fresh water, but we're looking at recycled water, coming from sewage, basically, recycling. Also, you have efficient fixtures for sinks. So, when you go to the World Cup, you go to the stadium. I mean, when you go to the toilets, you'll find, efficient fixtures in the sinks. For the players, they will find them in the showers, and in the toilets as well. So, at the same time, I mean, many people talk about the air conditioning. I mean, first of all, in a country like Qatar, where it gets very, very hot during the summertime. I mean, at the moment, we are recording this during the summertime, and it is really, really hot at the moment. I think today we're 40 Celsius. I mean, that's normal temperatures in the region. Goes from 40 to 50. In order to ensure that all of this infrastructure will have a use, we need to ensure that it can be used throughout the entire year. If we had not installed air conditioning in those stadiums, it would be impossible to use them during the summer months. So, I mean, let's start from those. Secondly, the stadiums, the majority of the stadiums use what we call district cooling. District cooling, as opposed to individual systems in each of the buildings. So, I mean, what that helps us to achieve is that basically the cooling is based on water circulation in the stadiums that is able to cool not only one building, but various buildings at the same time in an area. What that means is that in the future, that same district cooling system could be used for various other buildings that are surrounding the stadium as well. And it is really, really efficient. So, for example, a system that is district cooling uses usually 50% less energy than a localized or individual building cooling system. In addition to that, the air conditioning that has been developed for the stadiums is very efficient. So that doesn't mean that the entire building needs to be cooled for hours and hours and hours, or even days, in order to achieve the right temperature. Actually, it can start to be cooled only, let's say, a couple of hours before the event is actually taking place. And the beauty of it is that cooling happens straight under the seats. So you would feel it immediately as you are entering the stadium as well. Also, there are what we call nozzles in the pitch, actually, that are able to cool the pitch as well. So it's not only the spectators, but also the players that would be able to feel it. In addition to that, some of the stadiums are having roofs that help, of course, to keep the stadium cool for a longer period of time. And they're able to separate the hot air that is outside with the cool air that is inside. So if you look at the cooling of a stadium, it's actually comprising only about 20% of the stadium's annual energy consumption. So it's actually not as dominant as many people think it is. So in summary, it is about the legacy, is about using an efficient system of cooling, and also implementing a number of practices as well to make it as efficient as possible during the operational time.
Yeah. Okay. So, and we talked about fan travel a little bit already. You mentioned that in terms of the international travel of fans and the impact that's going to have. I think that's reflective of many tournaments that happen globally that are one-offs. The majority of their emissions obviously are coming from people traveling to the tournaments. But you mentioned maybe just a short interlude on the local transport. So, okay, people are traveling into the country and there's that international travel. When they get there, how are you supporting sustainable travel between venues or between accommodation and venues?
I mean, the beauty of the Qatar World Cup is that it's very compact. So different to previous World Cups, I mean, you don't need to do intercity travel. Obviously, you can stay in just one city, you can stay in the same hotel, and you just use public transport to get to all the different sites. So in terms of getting to the different stadiums, also other sites like the FIFA Fan Festival and others, you're able to use the metro system. That is, of course, low emission public system, as well as buses. I mean, I think in the cases of mainly three of the stadiums, Al Tamama, Al Janoub, and Al Bayt, I mean, you will need to take take the metro all the way to a particular stadium, and then station, and then you can take the bus that will take you there. So as an international fan, you're able to go everywhere with public transport. As I was saying earlier as well, I mean, 25% of the buses are electric. And of course, they reduce as well the carbon emissions in relation to the tournament. And of course, in terms of the constituent groups associated with the World Cup, I mean, the event transport system is also going to be using low carbon transportation. That is, of course, being supported by the fact that more of the energy mix in Qatar is starting to come from renewables or from natural gas at the moment.
Just as a sidebar, is that local travel included in fan tickets, or is that something that they would get when they're there in terms of a pass to get around, etc.?
Yeah, great point. I mean, thank you for reminding me about that. Yes, I mean, that is part of what is called the Haya card. That is the fan ID.
Yeah.
Some of you may remember the fan ID from Russia and from other events. That fan ID is not only in essence, your visa to enter the country, also to enter the stadiums with your ticket, but also provides you free public transport during match days, actually. So you can move around for free with that in all of the public sector transportation. That's
great to know. Yeah. Last couple I want to ask you about in terms of the environmental implications just before we finish off. It's just the waste in terms of, obviously, mega sports events create a huge amount of waste, whether it's food, plastic, packaging. Sometimes for certain events, there's sort of fan activations that lead to a lot of waste, etc. What are you doing in terms of trying to minimize that waste to start off with, and then obviously recycling, reusing, or trying to make sure there isn't a huge amount of waste left over at the end of this tournament?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, we are very proud of the effort so far. I mean, during the Arab Cup, we started trialing a number of different activities. So the Arab Cup happened at the end of 2021 in Al Bayt Stadium. That is the stadium where the opening match is going to be held, also the opening ceremony. We actually tested particular segregation procedures, and we were able to achieve a 70% diversion from landfill rate, which is, in my view, leading not only in Qatar but internationally as well. In other stadiums, following a different approach with less waste compound segregation procedures, we were able to achieve 40%, which is still pretty high and pretty respectable, actually. We're aiming for even more, and we're aiming to apply the same approach that we applied in Al Bayt Stadium. We're looking at applying it in all of the different World Cup stadiums during the World Cup. So, when we look at waste, we need to start with basically looking at what we call the upstream, and we look at trying to reduce the amount of materials that are coming to site to start with, or replacing materials that wouldn't be recyclable with materials that would be easily recyclable or compostable. For example, in canteens, we look at compostable packaging that is being given together with food to staff, volunteers, etc., together with the meal. So, that is an area where we work quite a lot in terms of replacing, reducing packaging. In terms of segregation, we actually implement a segregation system, not only in front of house, but also in back of house. Looks at recyclables, non-recyclables. In back of house, we look also at other waste streams, including compostables and organic waste as well. We're actually implementing a number of measures to maximize how much segregation can actually take place. If I can be also very open, Claire, I mean, the segregation is one of the biggest challenges that we have. Not only in this part of the world, it is not something that is very, very commonly done in terms of people used to segregating their waste into different bins or to identify what is recyclable, what is not. I mean, to be honest, it's sometimes not easy at all. Mm-hmm. But also we know that during the World Cup, we're going to be receiving people from all around the world. Some of them would be used to this, some of them will not be used to this. So is how much can we help them by creating awareness? I mean, you will see that in the high application that is for fans, in fan guidance, in social media, in infotainment on the stadiums, quite a lot of the signage. We'll be trying to provide as much guidance as possible to make it easy for people to actually use that segregation system. But it is not easy. We will need to, shouldering, we will need to support that segregation, not only in the front of house, but also, most importantly, in the waste compound. So with additional segregation activities. So if the waste that is getting to the waste compound is not segregated enough, is coming in polluted, that will affect heavily our recycling and composting rates. Therefore, we need to, of course, implement those there. In addition, and I think that is probably one of the other things that we're doing that I wanted to highlight is training.
Yeah.
We do quite a lot of training. Not only on environmental topics, but also on other topics such as human rights. But I mean, in terms of recycling, is one of the main areas of training that we train everybody. More than 20,000 volunteers, more than 20,000 private security officers, all of the staff, quite a lot of the contractors, commercial affiliates that are having activations also in the city. So everybody is being trained to understand how the segregation system actually works, and how to basically make the best out of it. So at the end of this year, we would have trained more than 75,000 people in relation to sustainability activities, including waste management. So that is some of the things that we're doing in this particular area.
Again, just for a yardstick for people listening to the podcast here, I think you mentioned there an aim to be 75% avoiding from landfill, and actually recycling rates in the Middle East are maybe 10 or 15% in terms of that avoidance from landfill.
And just to highlight as well, I mean, basically 70% is what we have been able to achieve in the past. I mean, we're aiming for even more. I mean, we're very ambitious with our targets. I mean, if we're able to, divert everything that we can. I mean, we will try our best, and we're putting the systems to achieve our very best possible results. And we are not just measuring ourselves against what is feasible and possible in the region or what has happened before. We're measuring ourselves, against excellence, really, in terms of mega sport and event management, and we will work towards doing our very best in this area.
Yeah. So the last one I just wanted to ask you about, before my final question, is just the supply chain impact. So you mentioned there in terms of the waste, the kind of upstream, downstream impacts, and obviously there's a lot of other supply chain impacts that you're thinking about, not just directly in stadiums or at official sites, but also within the broader supply chain. So again, how does that figure in terms of the impact of the tournament?
I think from the very beginning we were quite clear that we couldn't just focus on direct operations. I mean, we needed to, of course, take responsibility in relation to the impacts that we have on supply chains. At the end of the day, without supply chains, with our partners, our suppliers, I mean, we would never be able to deliver an event of this magnitude. So, a big part of our strategy is sustainable procurement. We developed a sustainable sourcing code, learning as well from previous events as well, and what they have done. And we were very clear with the market. These are the expectations that we have from you in terms of supporting us to deliver a sustainable tournament. The sustainable sourcing code is a requirement in all procurements. It's actually included as reference in all procurements, but also we have identified, and you will see that in the code that of course is published, you will see that we have identified high risk areas in relation to different types of risks. It could be climate change risk, it could be waste-related risks, it could be human rights-related risks. So depending on those risks, any procurement that has high sustainability or human rights risks will imply that the sustainability team will get very, very involved in every single stage of the process. In Q22, every single procurement that is high risk comes through us. We are involved in approving scopes of work. We are involved in supporting the functional areas to define requirements. We're involved in the technical assessment. And we're also involved in follow-up. So, we carry out audits as well. I mean, we have a third-party agency that helps us to audit our high-risk suppliers. And they look at social audits, they look at environmental audits, they are looking at how the requirements that we had are being fulfilled. And that is happening not only in suppliers that are based in Qatar, but also suppliers that are based in, outside of Qatar as well. By the way, this sustainable sourcing code applies not only to our suppliers, but also to our licensees. If you come to Qatar at the moment, if you go obviously to the World Cup, you will see many different licensed products. It's very important for us to understand where those came from, how they were produced, who was involved, and to ensure that people that are buying those, have confidence in basically how the impacts related to those have been managed.
Yeah. Okay, there's been a huge amount of information there, and I appreciate you sharing in terms of the tournament and the work that you're doing and some of the responses to the questions that have been put out there about the work that's happening in terms of the environmental sustainability. So that's really appreciated. And just to finish off, I want to ask you, from obviously a professional but also a personal perspective in terms of your role, having worked at the nexus of sport and sustainability now for many years, the trends or observations you're seeing within the world of sport as we continue to do more and more on sustainability, specifically in regard to obviously the environmental pillar of sustainability. What would you say are the big trends that you're seeing or observing?
I mean, one thing that I'm not sure if it is a trend, but I would like it to be a trend, is the collaboration between, very, very close and closer collaboration between the federations, the host nations, and the local organizers. I think that in some cases there is a bit of a divide. There is a bit of a, my requirements, or this is a host country matter, or it's something that the local committee just needs to take care of, type of thing. One thing that we have done in Qatar as well that I think we have learned a lot from is having a shared plan, having a shared strategy. It doesn't really make sense. You cannot deliver a sustainable tournament when you are only looking at limited scopes of one particular organization. You need to look at the full picture. You need to look at the element of running the tournament operations at the same time as the host country operations. You need to look at the preparation activities, but also at the staging, and also at what happens after, all together. So, I mean, hopefully that having more of that joint work, focusing on the pre, during, and post is something that will continue to grow and will continue to happen. At the same time, I mean, on that same note, sustainability is not something that is just delivered by sustainability team. I mean, it's something that everybody needs to be getting involved. I mean, all of the functional areas, but also I would like to see, or I'm seeing as well, the more involvement from a wide range of different parties. I mean, we see a lot of interest coming through from participating member associations as well. Those teams from around the world that are going to be participating, they want to know what is happening in the environmental agendas, in the legacy agendas, in the human rights agendas. They want to understand. I mean, the commercial affiliates are also very keen to understand more how they are associating their brands. At the same time, the other way around, the federations are keen to understand who they are associating as well, their activities with, in terms of commercial affiliates. The participation of fans, the participation of players as well. We see more and more involvement from fans and interest from fans. We have been able to host fan groups here in Qatar, representing different types of interest as well, and being able to explain to them how we're working. But what I would say is that it's not just about them being really interested, about what is happening, what is being done. But one of the biggest challenges, in my view, is how do we bring participating member associations, commercial affiliates, international fan groups to be part of the solution as well, to contribute to the reduction of climate impacts, for example, to promoting a more inclusive tournament experience for everyone, taking responsibility as well for some of the impacts that they have as well. So that is something really that I would like to see happening. And I mean, we spoke about climate change, Claire, and of course a big topic. I think of the podcast. There are very, very important, I think, questions that need to be answered and that need to be discussed going forward, really. And one of the big ones is about travel.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, of course, more than 1 million people that will be traveling to the World Cup. I mean, which is, of course, amazing. Is great. I mean, is a very popular sport and event around the world. Not mentioning the billions that will be watching it on television. But how do we marry reducing the impacts associated with fan travel while still providing fans with an amazing experience? What is going to be the role of remote technology there in the future? I mean, as you see, more and more technologies coming to be able to provide more information, better experiences for fans that are at home. I mean, what is the role that is going to be playing going forward? and how is that going to be balanced with, of course, ticket sales?
Yeah.
How is it going to be balanced with, of course, the revenues of organizations and host nations as well in terms of recovering some of their investment? I don't have the answers, but I see that as a very important discussion point going forward. The other important point, I would say, in terms of climate change as well, is related to infrastructure development. I mean, big source as well of carbon emissions associated with the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, of course, are related to construction. And how do we marry again the need for some of the host nations to develop infrastructure and to be able to do so, or need to do so, in order to host in the future, versus hosting these type of events only in countries that already have the infrastructure as well? I mean, are we going to be reducing the possibility of some countries to be able to host these events in the future? I mean, how can we balance both things? What type of standards, what type of guidance can we follow in order to give people opportunity at the same time as managing impacts as well? So these are discussions that, in my view, need to take place going forward.
Yeah, the challenges of sport as a whole, I think it's massively exacerbated for mega sports events because of the scale of them. But I think it's also reflective of sport as a whole in terms of at what stage does adaptation move into something that's unpalatable. It's something we've spoken about on the podcast and in our summits and discussions before, in terms of there's very few places in the world that could host an event of this size without adding extra infrastructure. Yeah. But also some of those nations that have that infrastructure don't necessarily want to host a mega sports tournament. They don't have the buy-in nationally to be able to do that. And it's marrying up all these things and what the future of mega sports events looks like, I think, whether in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time, there'll still be a license to operate for these major events if the level of work has to go into these certain nations to make them happen. So I think they're big existential questions for mega sports events in the future, depending on how these environmental impacts are and how climate change impacts exacerbate as well.
And I think that those are discussions that need to happen. I mean, basically, of course, that license wants to be kept, or the organizers would want to keep it. It is about how, what is the model? How is it going to look like? How can we balance, of course, the impacts associated with it? How can we start to add value, reduce impacts, add positives in the relevant areas? So it's about how the industry will continue to adapt as well, in terms of ensuring that those events continue to happen in a responsible, feasible way, really.
Absolutely. So a good place to finish there for our listeners to ponder and hopefully respond with their own thoughts in terms of the future of mega sports events. But thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. That was José Retana, Sustainability Senior Manager at FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022. Thanks for listening to the Climate of Sport podcast. Please like and subscribe and get in touch if you want to share information about the work that you're doing, if you want to appear as a guest or you want to recommend guests, or you just have ideas of conversations you'd like us to have. You can get in touch by emailing info@sportpositivesummit.com.